We should talk about some of the roster moves that are happening in the West, particularly like the G2 reunion that seems to be happening on Heretics, which is quite strange. With Perks, Jankos, and Wonder kind of getting the band back together, it would appear, under Peter Dunn's leadership. Feels weird that all of these players would be available. I thought Wonder might go to Cloud9, I think, but a lot of the European players are not seeing the big paycheck opportunities that they did previously in their careers. And so I think staying in Europe is a more attractive option.
Here's a little bit of juice for you. I heard this year, when they were having those issues in Vitality, that Perks wanted Wonder to come to Vitality this year and play with him. So if people don't know, like, I'm not surprised those three would combo together. Like, as far as I know, Perks and Jankos do both think each other's like the best player ever, blah, 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 or whatever. And then obviously, if people don't know, it's only fans that got tricked into that whole, like, Wonder's not actually good and he doesn't play the game. Like, I've told this story before, but I'll say it again. If you actually talk to the people who were in the G2 lineups that Wonder was really good in, they say the whole thing is he's just one of those rare players who actually is better when they don't over practice. Like, he's the guy where you don't tell him go play 10 solo queue games. That will actually make him worse. What you do is you just tell him, right, the scrims are at whatever 3 p.m. and then they say he'll just come prepared. Like, he'll sit and like conceptualize a matchup, or he'll play like a few scrims on a certain champion to see how it works. But apparently they say he's actually one of the best scrim players, and that was the whole point, is he didn't need as much practice as other people. He's obviously very talented. So I'm not actually that surprised those three would combo together. Like, to me, Wonder, I mean, he showed it this bloody season with Fnatic when he came in last minute as the stand-in. He's just a really fucking talented player, clearly. Like, there's something about that guy's game just never goes away. It's always like, it's just waiting in the background, bubbling up. And then Jankos himself is still a mega, by the way. He's arguably still at the top of his game. Perks is obviously the questionable one, but the other two have had enough experience. If you know how players are, you'll know this from when you're coaching people. People also do things like, if a player has success with you or he's really good with you, it sort of like imprints in your brain, like that's who that guy is. So they'll be willing to give Perks more chances than maybe like a modern player that played with him last season would. So actually, I think it's like a banger roster on paper. Like, obviously, the only dodgy part is, like, look, I get why they might keep flacking, because it's the whole thing of like, oh, it's a fucking Spanish team. How did Kaiser end up as that stuff? That's the one I don't get. It's like, what's going on with that? Because to me, Kaiser was far and away the worst player on Vitality. Like, you looked at the whole year almost.
I mean, you would have thought that like Perks brought him along for the ride potentially. Look, Kaiser has been
given fucking one of his kidneys or something. What's going on here? Why does he owe this guy? What is this?
Kaiser has been really good in the past, though, and I think if we think back to
years ago, and by the way, think back to the Mad Lions like him, yeah.
I think he's a good teammate.
I was in. Yeah, keep going.
Oh, I think he was a good teammate. Peter Dunn obviously knows him from his time on Mad Lions as well, and probably thinks highly of him. So I bet it was some sort of agreement between Peter Dunn, maybe, and Perks, who think that perhaps he wasn't playing up to his potential for potentially, exterior factors or teammate factors, because both those players should know Kaiser really well. And I refuse to believe that Kaiser can't be really good again. He was so interesting as a player at his peak. I mean, remember all those like Senna Wukong games, and the Mad Lions was really like pioneering bot lane meta for a while, and a lot of that was Kaiser's champion pool and his flexibility. So I think Kaiser can get back there. It's just a matter of getting to that point.
I'm definitely interested to see the three G2 players to get together again, though, because that's another thing I actually did think was whack about people being like, lol, look how shit LEC is. It's like, yeah, because if at the beginning of the year, if you'd asked me to make a list of the top 15 players, like, didn't like fucking like 3 of them get to Worlds or something? We were talking about like most of them all failed on like XL and Vitality and all those teams, didn't they? Like fucking Larson, where was he? Off in prison in Koi. Like, I actually think Europe did like one of its worst jobs ever sending a top set of teams. So even though in this offseason I've seen some mega sus ones already, and I have heard, as I've mentioned on Twitter, I have heard, unfortunately, the Spanish and French teams are massively pivoting to just national players for like cynical reasons. So I've heard there is a world where some really big names either don't get a team or end up on a team you wouldn't even think they could be. I mean, like, already I would just say this: is no one else shocked by the news like Niski will play for SK Gaming? Like, in your brain, Niski's always supposed to be on a contender. Like, this is a guy who's been at Worlds a billion times now, but he's going to be on SK Gaming. Like, I think that this is going to be a weird fucking league. There's now the news, maybe Larson goes back to Koi. Like, maybe there's nowhere else to go. Well, then they're going to be like whatever, Rogue or whatever the fuck they're going to rebrand as now, aren't they? So we'll see on that one.
Yeah, even like BDS kicking Crownie, and Crownie had the biggest peak of any of their players this year. I think if you go back to the split that they were one game away from winning in spring, and he was really hard carrying this roster, he really has gotten the short end of the stick, it feels like, unfairly multiple times in his career. And he's certainly an LEC capable player. I think you'd have to be delusional, even if he didn't have the greatest Worlds run. And I don't think he did. Like, I think he kind of played bad.
Especially because who's coming in? That's the question always on a move like that, right? It's like, who are you replacing him with? Like, it's they're not the ones who are getting upset. That's Carmine Corpus. Like, so, and Kazi apparently is just out in the wilderness. Like, what's going on? That's the thing I don't get, Monty. It's one thing, like, if you want to replace Crowley, but you have literally got like a better player or historically better player, okay, fair enough. If you've got no one, like, who the fuck is it going to be? Just some fucking nobody.
Yeah. It also feels weird that Mad Lions is just, I think a lot of teams, this is the new delusion. This is my theory, Thorin. The new delusion is you saw Carmine Corp's success in the amateur regions of Europe, and you see the amount of local fan base that you have, and Mad Lions just wants a piece of that now. They're a very cynically run team. And they're kind of in trouble, guys. Like, this is a team that has been struggling across multiple esports because, remember, they've got Overwatch League that's folding. They put a bunch of money into the Toronto team in Overwatch. They also own Mad Lions. They had to purchase that spot from Splice, and they had to purchase the branding. They own the Call of Duty team in Toronto as well. They had a pretty mediocre run as a Counter-Strike team. They haven't really hit it outside of Mad Lions. And if you see Carmine Corp's success and you think you can do the same thing in Spain, well, I guess El Yoya just gets the coup. He executes the coup on the team. You just become a Spanish roster. It is wild to me that they would kick out Mac. Like, I thought losing Peter Dunn was bad, but Mac was one of the primary architects of this team and by all means a very good coach. And especially, I think it was especially dirty what they did to him because he doesn't go to Worlds because he's literally having his wife is having their child. And then they kick him out right as this is occurring. They're like, oh, no, you don't have to go to Worlds. By the way, you don't have a job anymore. Like, just feels bad. I get that that's the reality of coaching.
The context is gross. Because think about this, right? It is true that he's bombed a bunch of Worlds. That's true. But here's the other thing, Monty. If you look at those rosters and at the beginning of each year, his team isn't even supposed to be at Worlds. What are you talking about? So, like, he actually earned the fucking status that he then lost by losing. Like, think of some of these rosters, dude. The roster that began last year had no chance to ever get to Worlds. What are we talking about? The one that had the Rika guy at the beginning of the year and wasn't even in the playoffs of LEC. Even this year, like, they were good in, like, the mini splits, but by the end, they were terrible by summer. Everyone was like, maybe they're not going to go to Worlds. And then they went again. So, like, I actually think it's insane because to me, this is a guy essentially who has taken what on paper would be like the third seed. And he's qualified sometimes as like a top 2 seed for the fucking region. He's gone to every international tournament as he at this point in time. So, like, look, you might not like the way it ended, but I mean, I think, bearing in mind he wasn't on G2 or Fnatic, like, can you get better results than these domestically?
Especially with the bankroll of this Mad Lions team. Think about their bankroll. I mean, they are certainly nowhere near the top of the league, and they were beating out XL didn't go to Worlds. They dropped a bunch of money. Vitality didn't go to Worlds. They dropped a bunch of money this year. Both of those teams certainly had higher payrolls than them. So did G2 and Fnatic. Like, that means at best they had the 5th highest payroll in the league. At best. And they performed significantly better relative to the amount of money that they were spending. And this has been consistently true across Peter Dunn and Mac-led teams. And by all accounts, they keep doing it over and over and over again. So there must be something there to their success. And players genuinely seem to like them a lot as well and seem to attribute a lot of this success to them. So I find it very confusing that Mad Lions is going in this direction because they seem to not understand that the reason they've had this success is because of people like Mac and Peter Dunn. And without them, all they are is a cynical Spanish pivot. They have none of the foundation anymore that made them punch above their weight. They have none of it. So unless the next guy can repeat that, feels unlikely because you have to go with Spanish players. It's going to be really rough. It's going to be really rough. It's delusion. It's delusion that just because you switch to a Spanish roster, you're going to replicate Carmine Corp's success that they had in France.
Plus, the rumor is that that Mad Lions is just going to get this like fucking Polish mid laner from like Movistar Riders as their mid laner apparently. So, okay. Sounds like, by the way, that's the sad thing. Like I say, it just sounds like a lot of these rosters is going to be worse. Like it's just going to be a meh fucking LEC, isn't it? Like I want a bunch of massive teams with big names. Where are those teams? Where the fuck are they?
Well, at least Heretics.
I mean, G2's running it back, I guess. G2's got the same
running it back.
It's not bad.
I'm sure Vitality will throw some more money around. They seem to love doing that, whether they win or lose. But like, there are a lot of questions like, what's happening to VTO? I don't know what's going on with that guy right now. There's a lot of deserving players that seem to be struggling. VTO is a player that, dare I say it, might end up in LCS just because of lack of anywhere else to go. Right? And there are going to be opportunities for more mid laners because the latest rumor, which seems to, it's the thing I speculated about previously, which is that it seems like Inspired is close to getting his green card, which explains why FlyQuest is taking, the mid or the jungle and top import slots with Whippo and Inspired, because there is a path to getting a foreign mid laner within that team.
I mean, that would be spicy if they get something like even Vethio or something would be a banger potentially, yeah.
Now, you can never predict exactly when those green cards are going to show up, and perhaps it's not until the summer split. But this is a very Papa Smithy-esque move. Wait for Sunday's green card, then you go get Abdage, win a title, wait for Inspired or Whippo's green card, permanent residency status, then you go get a mid laner and win a title. And the thing is that's interesting about America, Thorin, is that if you have a green card, you actually cannot be discriminated against as a foreigner.
Like legally, yeah.
Legally. So what it means is it doesn't matter. Riot actually can't put a minimum amount of time.
Yes.
Like they can't say you have to play for 3 years within the region. Legally in America, they can only say however long it takes you to get a green card, that's how long you can count as a foreign resident, because otherwise it would allow companies to potentially discriminate between green card holders and full American citizens. And they don't want the green card to have that negativity. It's an interesting aspect. And people also forget that a lot of the green card delays were caused by the COVID pandemic.
Of
and
course,
now that we're a couple years past those delays, like a year or two after those delays, I think some of the bureaucracy is happening faster now within the United States, which may lead to faster green cards or faster permanent residency status for these people.
By the way, one thing I did want to throw at you on the off-season stuff is, haven't you noticed how the most conspicuous name is where the fuck is Fnatic in any of these, Monte? There are no Fnatic rumors. There are no rumors of big name X goes to Fnatic, young top ERL player goes to Fnatic. Right now, Fnatic is just sat there. I don't even know what their roster is going to be, mate. It's going to be fucking who knows at this point, right?
I don't think they have a lot of money, Thorin, is my guess.
I mean, the other concern I have is, like, as far as I know, I think Humanoid's contract runs till the end of next year. And as I've pointed out, I've heard he actually has a ridiculous contract you can't shift. Like, he sort of signed at the perfect time, and obviously no one wants that when you, like...
You'd have to just let him be a free agent, probably, if you wanted to get rid of him, right? Terminate the contract.
It's probably not worth doing if you're Fnatic. You might as well just gamble that he's going to be half decent, right?
Yeah. But I don't know if I can watch another year of Razork humanoid anti-synergy, dude. I feel like this has really run its course at this point in time. And even though Fnatic has overperformed, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to continue that pace, especially as some of these other European rosters shuffle around.
Because if I'm them, like, surely at this point in time, everyone thinks Razork's good now. Surely you can trade him for a good jungler as well and get someone good and swap, and like it'd be beneficial for both parties. Like, I think Razork could play with tons of people, mate. Like, think of some of the people who are out there. Like,
he'd be great.
Fucking Larson hasn't signed anywhere yet. Technically, we don't know. Is Markoon staying as the jungler of SK? Wouldn't Nisky and Razork be an interesting one? Like, I think it's some pretty interesting matchups you can make out there.
I like the Nisky and Razork one.
I would take this guy. I would take this guy for a lot of teams.
Yeah,
I actually think
really
this last year really showed that it's sometimes just the team. Like, for example, even though some people obviously go mad, I'm not surprised someone was willing to gamble on Bo. Every player I was talking to privately, dude, told me he is in scrims like the player that everyone hopes is like some mechanical prodigy, Phenom. He just, for whatever reason, he just lost his head and didn't play normal fucking jungle champions at the end. Like, that guy is like a mega talent. I'm not surprised they're reopening whatever the fucking Carmine Corp team. Like, looks like a good gamble.
Yeah. Why not? He's a very exciting player at the very least. And you can always replace him down the line or have some sort of like backup jungler plan in place in case it all goes to hell. You could structure his contract in a way where, if he's not getting active play time, that he can be cut for a relatively minor fee or something like that. There's a lot of ways I think you could do this for Bo. That makes sense. And, there's just not a lot of places for people to go right now. A lot of these teams are, a lot of the teams in the league are going to be going budget rosters. Again, NA is not the super money region anymore that's going to be attracting a lot of elite international talent. Like, some players will go there simply because they don't have another place to go, but it's not because they're getting the bag anymore. And if you're not getting the bag, then frankly, I think a lot of players will just prefer to not get the bag in Korea or Europe instead of leaving their home continent, right? Doesn't feel great. There are a couple teams, I think, in NA that'll still shell out. Like Cloud9 obviously is doing something. FlyQuest still has a lot of money from their new ownership that they can deploy, but TSM is gone. NRG seems to be cutting costs. Now Ignar apparently is going to XL, so they're definitely not going to keep this iteration of NRG together.
What you mean fully. That's good, Monte, because Ignar's Korean, and that means they can get a North American player and invest in NA talent. That's how you make top 8 at Worlds.
Yeah, very good idea.
Remember that real bit that everyone totally believes in, but now magically won't believe in the offseason as the team gets worse. Like, give me a fucking break. People like that. It's so stupid, isn't it? That's a tragedy. I actually like that NRG team, but obviously it makes sense why they're cutting costs. Like, I'm sure Ignar can just make more now, of course.
Yeah. And I think
that a mercenary. Come on, it's like he fucking loves NRG, is it? He didn't even know the org.
It's not like, it's not like NRG is going to come in and overpay massively. That's why they paid $0 for that CLG slots, and they kind of like traded equity within the company for it. They are here to make a sustainable business, and until the people you have to blame are Riot, guys. Riot's the one that's not letting them have any microtransaction money in the game. Riot's the one who's incapable of getting media rights deals done. And so why are the teams getting punished when Riot can't create revenue? Is it, a lot of Riot's responsibility for the declining viewership of the LCS. So run your team sustainably. Use the revenue sharing, the $2 million you get a year, run your team. That should be it. That should be it.
The thing is, though, that also means, though, now it is on the GMs. Like, now if you have a great eye as a GM and you can make a team a la what NRG did end up with, then you could potentially do something. Like, one thing I want to ask you about is, what do you actually think about, because it looks like the Shopify Rebellion team that's bought TSM. Doesn't look like they're going crazy with the fucking money either, does it? Looks like a fairly, just cheapo roster. Like, not bad players, but just all right players, basically.
Yeah, I think
because every idiot still thinks it's like they're coming in, they're buying a big team. It's like no one does that almost. There's almost no one does that, guys. Come on.
Yeah, and TSM was actually, we know that they were just in the budget mode towards the end. Like they were probably making a profit off of the revenue sharing. Shopify Rebellion comes in, they spend what, 10 million or whatever. TSM just didn't actually make any profit off of the sale of their slot whatsoever, and indeed lost a lot in terms of operational expenses. But there's no reason to come into this space and just blow out the market, especially because Shopify Rebellion is very well diversified across a variety of esports right now. They have a lot of famous StarCraft players. They have a good Dota team, right? There's no reason for them, like this is a good asset for them to have, but they don't have to, they understand they're probably not going to be the best in the world, because they're competing in other games in which they could have the best in the world, and they're never going to win worlds from LCS. That's just literally impossible because of the level of competition. So what's the point in spending big? Try and develop your fan base, try and develop your brand. And it's, at the end of the day, kind of a fun toy for the CEO who's just an esports fan. He's an avid esports fan, starting with StarCraft 2, as many people know. Makes sense that they're not going to, go crazy at first, especially because, as far as I know, they don't have anybody in the organization who really knows League of Legends. If you splash out and spend a bunch of money when you don't exactly know the ins and outs of how to GM a League of Legends team, you're probably going to set yourself up for failure right at the gate. I think taking it slow is the right way to go.
If someone could just go back in a time machine to about 2015 and then deliver what Monte just said to all the owners there, then LCS will be fine. All work out. Turns out, believe it or not, Monte, the second you just come into the game and you don't know the space, it's a bit like gambling. If you're going to go and play poker, probably wait till you've learned like the rules of poker before spending all your bankroll. But of course, everyone did the opposite in LCS. They actually did come in and just go, what the hell? Just pay him 3 times more. This is easy, getting all the best players. This is easy. And then they're like, can I have another 30 million? And they're like, sure. And then eventually they were like, definitely not. Like, where's my 30 mil?
It was actually crazy to be there at the start of the venture capital rush, Thorin, because when I owned Renegades, when Immortals came in, they, for absolutely no reason, like 4x'd player salaries. There's no reason to do it, by the way. They were like beating the market for no reason, right? They could have just made the better offer.
Maybe Noah Winston was doing that JFK angle, though. He was like, a lot of people, Monte, ask why. I ask, why not? And he's just spending the money for no reason whatsoever. I know it's mental, isn't it?
But it was so weird to be part of the league at this time, because you think you have this budget, and then all of a sudden Immortals comes in and they're just like, but what if we played the players 4 times that? And you're like, why are you doing that? Stop doing that right now. You could just pay a little bit more.
Simultaneously, we're like, you know what? I think everyone in the industry should just go public with their salaries and just say what everyone's making. I think it'd be better for the industry as a whole. While they were doing that at the same time, just because then everyone would look like a dickhead, wouldn't they, compared to them? Although the joke is they actually looked like the dickhead if you knew the industry. But yeah, whatever. Who knew that the good times couldn't roll forever, Monte, and that we could just... What's mad about that is, remember, Noah Winston himself was the guy who did flex, like, that he sort of believed in, like, certain, like, communist concepts from actual Marx, believe it or not. He did, like, a whole speech on it. But what's mad is, he himself appeared to actually believe in an economic model of eternal exponential growth that never ends. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work. So the irony is, in some ways, he was the hyper-capitalist after all, Monte. Although, to be fair, if you remember, Marx's actual position was that communism would naturally come when capitalism had transformed to a certain extent. So maybe Noah Winston was just a hyper-accelerationist. He was just trying to force in some ways. Because what did we end up with? We ended up with a scenario at the end where everyone was like, just let a centrally planned government called Riot give out stipends that everyone lives within those. It actually did become at the end almost like his commie utopia. He almost got it at the end.
Yeah, exactly. What if there was just a central authoritarian government that handed out all of the resources, but you didn't have a say in the generation of those resources?
Yes.
And in fact, you were bound by the laws of society in order to simply just obey them, and you couldn't actually affect any of the outcome or decision making and had to wait in line for your loaf of bread, as it were. And there was no negotiating with them either, because they were all powerful.
And very also, they can send people like Dom and Monte. I mean, Dom got to come back from the gulag, but they just get sent off to some gulag somewhere where you never heard from again, and they apologize for everything. Dom's the rare one that got to come back to Moscow, as it were, in this analogy, you know. He came back all broke. No, it's all fine. It's all fine. No, I'm fine with Riot now. It's all good. No. Nails. I'd never paint nails any color, whatever. Like, bloody hell. Fucking. That's still the maddest shit ever. That's what he got banned for. Of all the things he's ever done and said, the idea that, like, the nail painting comment was the one that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I can't handle it. It's so stupid, isn't it? It's so stupid.
I just can't even imagine being in that conversation.
I know.
I will dominate. This was too far. And he's just like, what? This one? Really?
So mental.
It's like the Loco Doco incident. Why then? Where the lines Riot draws are truly puzzling.
Oh, by the way, guys, I know he did lie and promise you all that he'd do it, but spoiler, now you know what it's like to know Loco. Loco will never come forward and tell us what really happened with that story. Like, he's just going to let it lie because that's who he is. He's just the guy who lets it lie, and he's just going to move on with. Sadly, Monte, like a real immature loser, he's just going to move on with his life and not worry about this petty grievance till the end of all time and finally get his glorious revenge, as I would 5 years later. But sadly, he's just going to go on with his life, fucking loser. I know.
Yeah, exactly. Not all of us can just waste our lives constantly reminding the populace of the grievances we have suffered at the hands of a. Let me check my notes here. Hold on. Video game company.
I know, it doesn't even matter. It's so bullshit.
It just shows how spiteful we are, Thorin.
we do make it sound when we talk about Riot like they are like fucking whatever Tim Curry's character in Legend, you know, like a giant like demon guy, like. But it is actually just a bunch of loser American guys who are just doing the shit esports tournament every year. Like, brilliant. That is who we've been wasting our time battling for all these time, the 10 years. And there's not even Reggie anymore. By the way, TSM's gone. Guys, we're talking about the replacement. They're gone. It's over. TSM's out. What the fuck?
Speaking of which, I do find it fun that TSM has made exactly zero peeps about what is happening with their alleged, ultra competitive roster that they're going to be putting together to definitely win the world championships, and totally wasn't another Reginald lie that the TSM fans have been eating for years and years and years and years and years for this point. Guys excited for their CBLOL roster or whatever it ends up being, or their branding partnership with an LPL team where they just slap a TSM logo on it and pretend it's them, even though clearly it's not. And that's not how you actually win a championship, by slapping your logo on it. Maybe you should have some satisfaction for creating that team, managing it. Although that really hasn't gone so well in more recent years for them. So maybe I understand if they're going to walk away a little bit.
I also just think, like, if you're TSM, you almost couldn't blue balls your fans worse, though. Because think about this, right? You even had in 2020 that lineup where you fucked around and you fluke won it with Doublelift and Bjergsen again. So in theory, everyone was happy again, Monte. They were like, oh, brilliant. Then Bjergsen retires, becomes a coach. I've told people you could have literally had Jensen as the mid laner, but they decided not to, with fucking power of evil. Like, you're the memes yourselves there, guys. You did that, not me. Like, you took power of evil like 4 years after he was really good, but you took him and then you wasted all that money paying Hooney. Remember, the whole thing of TSM, Monty, is we don't recruit Koreans and we definitely don't overpay them. You paid fucking Hooney at the end and then had that worthless, like, one split or whatever of Sword Art, then just gave him the entire bag and then just left League of Legends. Like, the way they ended it was so sad, because if people don't know, in the middle of LCS, just like Cloud9, TSM was doing an insane job. They were like min-maxing salaries where even the stars weren't on as much as you think they were on, but they were always either winning or top 3 every single split. Like, they were always in the mix. Like, that was actually an amazing job. And then the last few years was like a bad version of decadence where you didn't even get anything good for it. You just overpaid for a year of Ernie and a fucking PoE to replace Bjergsen. You get the Sword Art one, blow that one, and then by the end, it's like you even do like moves I told you to do 7 years ago. Like, get that Maple guy. It's like you hear that echo. It's like Reginald's waking up from Maple. Get Maple. It's like, that was 7 years ago I said that. Like, just get him at the end when he's all right. Like, what a fucking shit way to leave LCS, guys. Like, they genuinely just burned like the last 3 years or something. They just did almost nothing with it. What the fuck?
I also think it's funny that they paid Sword Art far more money than they ever paid Bjergsen in total for all of Bjergsen's years on the team, and not like by a order of magnitude, guys. Like,
yes. Oh no, the real joke is this. Think about what a sick indictment it is of the LCS. That unironically, Sword Art, I mean, look, Bjergsen did make a few mil on the last few years. Sword Art, just from his 1 year in LCS, might have made as much or more than Bjergsen's entire time in the LCS, which kind of the whole thing was like hard MVP every year. It's fucking insane, isn't it? Because essentially Sword Art came at the most perfect time ever. By the way, I'll tie this into what we were talking about with LEC. Here's the difference, Monty. Notice how in this discussion, it isn't like, oh, sorry, Monty, it turns out Mad Lions aren't going to sign a good player, so the star will just go to NA. Apparently, according to what I've heard, almost no one's thinking of going to NA. Like, those deals for millions just don't exist anymore. It's actually sad because a bunch of the players told me, I wasn't even memeing, I really did think, like, I'll go and do like a perks victory lap around NA for the last year and get like the millions. It's like, obviously there aren't any millions and there might never be again now. So sadly, they've had to all come back to reality that if you picked to stay in EU for a more competitive team, look, I respect it. It's a great move, but you'll never get the millions now. Like, that ship has sailed, I'm afraid. Now you just have to get a nice 300k contract, which, look, let's be real. Don't be a fucking cunt. That is still pretty good money. But it does suck when Hooney, the aforementioned Hooney, every year was like, right, which of you gentlemen would like to pay me $1 million a year to play top lane? I play 2.5 champion, going once, going twice, 4 million. Oh, right.
Did you see my Lucian top 10s? Anybody?
The amount of times he got signed is so fucking crazy, wasn't it? So crazy.
I love that guy. I think he should be an agent after this. He was his own best ally. He represented himself that entire time. Actually, genius agent. Actually, genius agent.
Whatever he was doing in those meetings, he was the fucking best. It was insane, wasn't it? It's insane.
He should totally be representing other players right now. 100%.
Oh, and by the way, I'll just throw this out there, being as finally, for once, they're doing what I've said. So let's just check where we're at right now. Steve Arnsett has actually got out of control now, because it's like he isn't recruiting players for today. He's just recruiting off Wikipedia. Because if he didn't think that Impact was any good anymore, Monty, in like fucking 2019. Why is he signing him again in 2023? 4 years later, like, what is this? Like, I think Impact's like got the craziest longevity ever, and you never should ever kick him. But why do these teams kick him and then go, wait a minute, what the hell? I should get Impact. We used to have him, sir. So we had him all those years ago. Probably wanted to sign again, and we just let him go for no reason. Why is every single team in NA doesn't care about this guy? It's mental.
I'm actually surprised Cloud9 didn't get him back too. I think both Cloud9. Yeah, I think Cloud9 could use a little impact with this new roster for sure. Especially since he's played with JoJo before. He's played with JoJo before now on EG.
He's still, ironically, still one of the best players you can sign in the LCS. Like, yeah, well, this year wasn't that great, but he'll have a bounce back. Who gives a fuck about that? He's mastered being. He's just a person who knows obviously how to make his own game peak.
Yes. And he's also just incredibly reliable. And if you need a weak side player, which Cloud9 absolutely does with Jojo Pion and Berserker and Blabber on this team, that's the kind of guy you go for. Yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense. But he's back on Team Liquid now. The number of teams that have just let Impact go is pretty fucking funny.
By the way, I have a real question. But obviously, in theory, I guess Jack's the person I should ask, which is, what is the deal with the Fudge guy? I don't get it. I genuinely don't like, I get the idea people like his personality. I get the idea people might think he's a friendly teammate. I've always thought he's a bit of an overrated player. Like, I understand the angle that he had, like, it doesn't count as an import. Like, okay, that's a plus.
But it doesn't matter now.
I just don't get it anymore, man. Like, what's the point?
It doesn't matter on this iteration of Cloud9's roster because the only import player that they have right now is Blabber.
Berserker.
Or Berserker. Sorry, it's Berserker. That's what I meant.
I knew you meant that.
Yeah. So, like, if they're going to get Jojo Pion, Blabber, and Vulcan, then it doesn't, like, they have an open import slot. So it doesn't really matter Fudge's status. I honestly think the answer is this, Thorin. Cloud9 doesn't. By
the way, if I was them, I would be the one trying to get Whipple. Imagine Whipple on Cloud9. Wouldn't that also be a bagger?
No, I think it's too flippy. You really want to play the fucking flip game with Blabber and Whippo, Jojo Pion all in the same team? That seems insane to me. Like the Blabber Whippo combo, either like
here's the main stomps. At least I can actually win the flip. With Fudge, I just start with like whatever the opposite of what I wanted was. And say, I picked tails, he goes heads. So I've lost anyway.
Clearly, you're dealing with a high ceiling there, but also the floor would be kind of disastrous. I would rather have Wonder on that lineup. All reliable, right? Veteran presence. Whippo is too much variance for me. I couldn't stomach that. And I honestly think, though, Thorin, that what happened is Cloud9 doesn't want to pay money for an import top laner. I think they're just like, we have Fudge. Fudge is good enough. The rest of we've seriously upgraded our, like, I think it makes sense. Look at it this way. You upgraded at support. You seriously upgraded at mid lane. This was a team that was winning titles and making it to finals with their mid lane in flux for the past 3 splits. Because remember, Jensen wasn't even good in summer of last year. So with these upgrades, isn't Fudge good enough to win a title? I mean, this team has been massively upgraded. I think this team looks really good. And if you're them...
My problem isn't winning the title. Like, winning the title was there anyway. It's that... Has he ever done anything internationally? Am I the only one who's missing
They don't care.
I've seen so many tournaments now. It's mental.
I don't think they care. I think they would rather just go to Worlds and do maybe slightly better with this new roster, but they don't have to pay a big ticket, big amount of money, because I think the only way to lure European players like Wonder to NA is to pay them a lot of money. And I think Cloud9 doesn't want to pay them a lot of money. So it's good enough. It's good enough for North America. It's good enough to make Worlds. Hard to believe that this wouldn't be a top 4 team come summer of next year. Really hard to believe.
This is a shame they didn't get a different top player, though. Could have been a mega. Actually, could have been a mega roster.
Yeah. Like I said, Wonder right there. Impact would have been interesting, but very, very much cheaper. Very much cheaper to have Fudge on this roster, I think.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.